Hey you, welcome back to Autistic Alignment, and this is my 5th solo episode. I'm still very shocked that I can even say that. Thank you for joining me in this space. I look forward to this moment where I can be here talking to you all week, and so thank you for turning back up. And for anyone who's new here, I'm Julia Kate Mitchell. I'm an autistic advocate living in Vancouver, and I work at the Pacific Autism Family Network, and I create content to upload that goes into the Autism is a Difference Microsoft and Apple analogy. I try to create content that is uplifting and supportive. That is my intention anyway. I hope that I am fulfilling that, and every time I show up here, I will try to make sure that I can do it better than I did before. I do this because I struggled with self-esteem quite a lot growing up, and finding out that I was autistic later in life just made me realize how many challenges I overcame and how many more I have to overcome. But I have a great team who is always there supporting me, and I'm in a really great position in my life right now, and so I just really want to be able to give a lot of that energy back to anyone listening. So whatever you are doing, you are great, you are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, just keep going. Keep going. And so today's episode is going to be on self-awareness. And I say every week it's my favorite topic, but this really is one of my favorites because, well, I get to go a little bit nerdy about it. I get to talk about intrinsic, extrinsic, and I'm sure I'll do a load more about this going forward, because after I was diagnosed, I was able to do a lot of reflecting, and I'll talk about that later in the podcast. But I do think this is a really important topic, mainly because when you are a minority, and as an autistic person I am, the majority of people around you will not have one. They have a more shared, they have like a shared identity. There's like this shared neurotypical culture, and when you're autistic, the way you communicate is different, and often that difference, for me anyway, left me feeling very invisible, and I was constantly having to change everything I did. I felt like other people understood me, but it left me feeling like there was kind of nothing there. I was just constantly performing, and that was my mask. And becoming more aware of myself helped me navigate these social situations in a more authentic way, and in a way that helped me build my own confidence and stand up for myself and really see my own value. So I hope that whoever you are, autistic or not, you have something to get out of this podcast, because more increased self-awareness is better for everyone. So thank you so much again, and let's get into it. So what really is self-awareness? Well, self-awareness is our thoughts, our feelings, how we navigate the world, why we do the things we do, and how to navigate life, essentially. It just comes down to our strengths and our challenges and our triggers, and it helps us work out how we feel about certain situations. However, for autistic people specifically, it can be a game changer. Like, everyone needs self-awareness, but because autistic people are a minority, and when the world around you is built for neurotypical people, it projects this image of neurotypical people in like magazines, on TV, like everything you consume is mostly neurotypical people, then it can make it kind of hard to understand who you are and your relationship with yourself, because you're like, wow, like I don't know if I really fit in. Not saying that's you, but that's how I feel anyway. So for me, developing a sense of self-awareness was difficult because I am quite insecure, and like I really do try to fit in. I try very hard to be cool, and so it was difficult because I couldn't understand how to do it, and there were all these parts of myself that I didn't see being, projected in society, and so I became ashamed and embarrassed of them to a degree that was probably, harmful. And that became a part of my mask, and I masked a lot of that in order to fit into other people's expectations. And that's why I became better at external awareness than internal self-awareness. And so external awareness is really understanding how other people perceive you and being very good at navigating this and understanding how other people feel and maybe their thoughts, and being able to become a person that you think they would like. That's what I did anyway. Whereas internal self-awareness is not about how other people perceive you, it's how you feel about yourself. It's like being aware of your own thoughts, your own behaviors, and not so much about how other people perceive these. And there is nothing wrong with being one way or the other. However, I do think some people are more likely to be one way or the other. So for example, if you are more extroverted, and I know some people don't like these terms, but if you are naturally more driven to other people, then you probably do have a higher sense of external self-awareness. Whereas if you are more focused, introverted, like focused on your interests and very much more introverted, you're probably likely to be more internally self-aware. However, when you have an even balance of both, it makes it a lot easier to navigate the world, because let's face it, we don't live in this world alone. And when we are better adept at asking for support and communicating that in a way that is received well by the people around us, it can make self-advocating a lot easier. And the same in reverse, like when you're so used to being something that you think other people want, when you become more aware of your internal feelings and thoughts and aligning with your sense of self, then it can make knowing what it is that you want in the first place a lot easier. Now, I found this quote from Rumi that I really liked, and I just wanted to share with you, but also it kind of brought up some stuff for me, so I want to talk about that as well. So it's, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself. And apparently this is about shifting from external to internal growth. And it was like, I felt like this really resonated for me, because growing up a lot, I was always like about doing humanitarian work and wanting to change the world, being so angry at everything. And there is definitely a place for that. But since I found out I was autistic, I've done a lot more internal work, and that has been very hard. But it got me thinking, like with a lot of autistic people, you know, it is more difficult for us to find our place in the world, and it's probably more difficult for us to be accepted. Therefore, is it necessarily true that, like, you know, just because we're going to change ourselves, we are wise? Because sometimes I feel like no matter how much we change ourselves, you know, maybe we're just not going to fit in. Or is that just being negative Nelly? And maybe there is a place for us. Well, I personally feel like, and again, I don't want to put everything back to my experience, but in my experience, there is a place for us. And I really feel like we can all be connected. But for me, it does come back to self-awareness and really accepting ourselves before other people accept us. Because when we accept ourselves, and we can accept how other people might view us, and both are very difficult, and I'll be honest, I'm 31, and when you're in your 30s, self-acceptance is a lot easier. I don't know where the accent came from, but yeah, getting to that point can be very challenging. And however, it is a lot less draining when you're trying to, well, I shouldn't say it's less draining, it's also hard, definitely changing yourself, but it can feel more rewarding, because if you always try to change the world, and as an autistic advocate, I want to, because there is so much about the world that we need to change to make space for autistic people, but that's so draining. It can be so draining and exhausting. And sometimes, you know, we do just want to, change little parts of ourselves in order to make that process easier. And the more balanced we are, and the more in tune with both we are, then it just sets us up for success. I really do believe this. So, what are some of the benefits that we get from having better self-awareness? What is the power that it gives us? What is the thing that drives us to become more self-aware? Well, some of the things that I have found becoming more self-aware have really helped me with have been with my relationships, because before I felt like I wasn't really, not that I wasn't honest about who I was, I think I wasn't honest about the reason. And again, like, I don't think you can always help that if you don't understand yourself so well, and for different people, understanding yourself can be more difficult. And so being more aware of myself helped me develop my friendships and relationships because, well, I was more honest about who I was and my own capacity, you know? So this improved my social interactions because I don't even want to say more able to communicate, because I do actually think my ability to communicate does ebb and flow. But yes, not I communicated verbally more, but what I was communicating, I think, held more substance. Kind of allowing me to communicate less, actually, ironically. It helped me develop my self-advocacy skills, and a lot of that came down to my lack of internal awareness because I didn't accept the things that I needed support with because I thought that it kind of made me a failure. So once I became more aware of that, and I learned that, I think as mentioned before, I have the executive functioning skills of a 6-year-old. I don't know, maybe in the past few months it's gone up. Wouldn't surprise me if it hadn't, because it's only been a few months. But, you know, acknowledging that and communicating that to the people around me, being aware that, I hate admitting this, but I don't like using the term emotional regulation or emotionally dysregulated, but being honest with myself about my emotional state, because often I would be fluctuating, but I didn't want to be held accountable for it, so I would put it on other people. However, when I became more self-aware and I was able to identify my triggers, it meant that I was also I could accept why I was fluctuating because I could see the things that triggered me, and when I communicated them, it made it easier for the people around me to become more aware, and then it helped me work on reducing my triggers. So this helped my overall emotional regulation. And I do think that when I was previously always comparing myself to neurotypicals, it was just not good for my mental health. But now I know that, you know, I'm on the spectrum. I don't even really have to compare myself to because I just accept that I'm different, and because everyone on the spectrum is different, I'm like, well, there's no point me comparing myself anyway, because the ways in which I'm different are going to be so different. And just really learning to love the way that I show up, which reduced the whole stigma around the word autism, because when I read about it as like having being a disease and stuff, well, the more self-aware I became, the more I was like, well, you know, that's what people might refer to us in the medical world as maybe having a condition that needs to be cured, but I'm an autistic advocate, and there is a need for more perspectives from autistic people, and so I can say my perspective, and not everyone has to believe it or accept it, because my perspective is literally just how I experience myself. And so I really encourage other people out there who are autistic to, when you're on this journey of self-awareness, know that when you look at yourself, don't look at yourself through the perspective of other autistic people. Or if you do, if you find something that you're like, you know, this feels uncomfortable and I don't align with that, great. You learn something about yourself, get rid of it. Doesn't suit you. And in fact, maybe there's a narrative out there that you're like, you know, I really value happiness, and when I believe this, it makes me happy, so I'm going to choose happiness over the other perspective, because you only get one life, and why not just choose to believe the other thing? There is not like a right or wrong when it comes to advocacy. Advocacy is based off the experiences of autistic people, and so you just pick the things that you want to be reflected in your life, and you believe that. And I know we get so stuck in like right or wrong and facts, but when it comes down to things like this, in your beliefs about yourself, you get to pick. That's the beauty of it, like you get to pick. So yeah, it can help you reduce your stigma and have healthier appreciation of yourself. And because of this, it can increase our problem solving ability, because we're able to see things from our perspective, we're able to see things from other people's perspective, and so we're able to bring these two things together and understand where maybe like there were some gaps or some grey areas in the middle. And that's one of the reasons I love being able to show up on this podcast and do advocacy, because there are so many grey areas in the world of autism, because I just feel like we all get so stuck into this like polarized world of thinking, and not so many people want to talk about maybe the grey in between, but the grey is the part I find fascinating. So I'm really grateful for that. But yes, it definitely does help our problem solving, and because of having these other things, parts of ourselves become more developed, and we become more stronger in our sense of self. We then have more likely to have a better mental health. We're more likely to become more authentic because we have accepted ourselves, whereas before we might be trying to hide some parts of ourselves that we weren't too comfortable with in order to make other people comfortable. And this overall reduces our need or desire to mask, ideally anyway. This isn't the case for everybody, especially depending on yours. However, and I know this is unfair because I'm aware that there's non-verbal people listening to this, and so when I say because it labels us to say this, I know I'm only speaking to some people and I haven't worked out how to navigate that space yet. But I do think that when I talk about communication, I would like to include body language, because even for example, my grandma would say smile and the world smiles back at you. And so I learned to see smiling as something positive. So when people smiled, that made me feel positive. And so I learned to connect those things. So then I would go around just smiling all the time, not even when something made me happy. And that just gave me a constant dopamine hit because I learned to really like smiling. So again, my point is that masking and self-awareness can also tie into the two. But you can also learn to use masking to your authentic advantage and become more cognizant of when we are putting on our masks and when we're taking it off, to prevent burnout and to have a more sustained relationship with ourselves, and not find showing up so draining, because I know it can be draining when you feel like you're really not allowed to be you. And so this gives us some tools that we can use to unmask, because not only can we be explained to other people why we're acting differently, why we may be doing certain things, because we have more of a self-awareness and we know this is because of the lights, this is because of this sound. I had a very busy weekend, and so I'm going to be rocking more and acting this way, or I'm not looking because, and again, I know all of this is to make neurotypical people feel more comfortable when we communicate in this way. However, it is also true that we are more likely to be perceived differently than the way we experience ourselves. We're more likely to be misunderstood. And so because of that, unfortunately, we do often have to work harder to be understood. But it can be very rewarding in the end. And this does build up a sense of resiliency because we are constantly having to do it. But it does get easier, and because it helps us align with who we naturally are, and helps us also remove ourselves from certain situations, and it helps us ask for our needs. And again, when you're more self-aware, I also feel like you can teach others how to love you and how to support you and how to show up in a way that benefits you. And I do think a lot of us get called selfish, but a lot of us are living in survival mode. And so if we know the things that we need to keep us happy or healthy, we can tell people around us that. I'm not saying they're going to listen, but we can definitely do our best. And so finally, how do we cultivate a sense of self-awareness? Now, there are so many ways that we can go about cultivating self-awareness, and I will get down to the more detailed things later on in different episodes. But for now, some of the things that I think are really important are that we understand our neurotype, because we are different from other people, and autism is a spectrum, and so is dyslexia and all the other things. But the more we can learn about where we show up on these things, so how I say emotionally dysregulated, I'm using that language because that's what non-autistic people use. I personally don't use that when I'm referring to just autistic people. And you know what, I'm probably talking to a lot of autistic people now, so I probably shouldn't use that word. When we are triggered, when we are burnt out, it is important that we know why. And it is important that we can communicate this, or it's important that the people around us can learn to understand it, and that they work just as hard to get to know us as we work to know them. And we can do this by reflecting on the ways in which we are different. We can use that chart that they made about the ways autism is different, are the way in which we experience autism. It is a spectrum, not a line. And then they give you the circle, and it explains all the differences. So really working out where you fit on that scale. And as we know, we're going to change from day to day. But if we are always trying to be present, or we go from being non-present to being present in our body, we can, at some given moments, work out where we are on that scale. And yes, it does change, but knowing the things that make you change and knowing why it shifts is also really important for our self-awareness. And this involves being able to identify our sensory preferences. So in this moment, what sounds do I like? What environments am I being drawn to? What textures do I like? What lights am I being attracted to? And then when the opposite thing happens and we go from being sensory seeking to sensory avoiding, okay, how am I changing? What is it that bothers me when I'm in this moment? So what do I need space? Do I need quiet? Do I need to not touch or taste certain things because it goes from being really interesting to really bothering me? And some of the tools I would use to do this are journaling, very helpful, and being able to be present and mindful in our body, just like writing down notes, keeping them out, sharing them with people, having these open, honest conversations, reflecting on the things that maybe got us into, I don't want to say this state because this state is being human, right? But yeah, the state that we are existing in, I mean. And some ways in which we can practice mindfulness are, well, I'm sure you all know, but deep breathing, meditation. There's this thing called the body scan where you like go from your head and you like relax all the muscles in your head, relax all the muscles in your shoulders, and we just keep going down. So we become very aware of the physical sensations in our body. And this is especially important for people who struggle to identify internal sensations, or the opposite, they are overreactive. So with me, I have a tendency to overeat at certain times because I'm not aware of if I'm hungry or not. When I'm full, and then I'll do the opposite where I won't eat for a very extended period of time because I didn't realize I was hungry. And I'll be honest, it also sometimes is around going to the toilet and with water. I won't drink water for ages because I won't know I'm thirsty, and then I'll just hold going into the washroom for ages because I won't realize I needed it. Probably shouldn't have shared too much information there. TMI, I'm sorry, but it's all part of education, and I am one of those people on the spectrum, so I'll share my experience with you to help your learning. Yeah, and okay, so I'm also, if you have alexithymia or you do struggle to identify emotions, please know that you're not alone in this. A lot of the stuff I've read out there about identifying your emotions, I can't relate to, okay? I'll be honest. It doesn't make sense to me, and I think it's because a lot of people prefer I don't want to say a deeper understanding of emotions, but that's really what it is. So I'm going to try and do my own interpretation or my own version of this that I find helpful. And again, my version's not based on science. Mine's just like the logic that I tell myself because it helps me navigate it. We'll dive more into that in, I think, maybe the next episode. But for now, just being able to reflect on our patterns of how we feel in our body. So, okay, like when I show up in these situations, it makes me feel this way. Or maybe you're like, I have so many feelings and it's too much for me to navigate. So just like writing them all down in like whether it's poetry or just writing in your journal, whatever helps you. Special interests. I would say a large part of being self-aware is knowing how invested you are in your special interests. Are they taking over? Are you doing what I do, where you will not sleep for days on end because you are so into your special interests that you are burning yourself out, and other people are then having to get the wrath of you because you're so focused on your special interests and not sleeping that you then become kind of moody, you're lashing out a bit, you're starting to become a bit delirious because you're so focused on this thing and you're not focusing on how other people are perceiving you. Is that you? That's me. I can become like that. So maybe this is you. So practicing, just being conscious of how much attention you spend to them can be really helpful. Feedback from the people around us. Okay, make sure it's people that you trust. Make sure that when you're getting feedback from the people around you, you're not like, this is 100% right. Like, it's not about being right. It's not about believing what they say. It's just about listening to what they say and being like, okay, that is their perception of me. This is what they view of me as. It might not match what you view yourself as or how you experience yourself. And I got stuck in this trap for ages where I was like, okay, now I've got to convince them that that's not true and I'm not like that. You don't have to. You really don't have to. Just accept that that's how they perceive you, and accept that this is how you perceive yourself. And if there's ever something you want to do to change someone else's perspective, instead of like trying to change it by like talking to them, I don't know, my grandma would just say prove them wrong, or my mom would just say prove them wrong. And not by like arguing about it, just by physically doing the thing. I do journal a lot and I scrapbook a lot, and I find this a very useful tool for self-reflection, and I tend to have a structured activity. So having a structured time in your week that you do it, how often you do it, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but if you're like me and you can become intensely interested on things, please be aware if you're going from, I'm going to do a 20-minute, 5-minute self-reflection on an evening to, okay, I just spent 13 hours writing in a journal, I've now completed most of the pages in it, like, that's probably saying that you're spending a bit too long doing it. Or maybe you're a bit like me and you were going through burnout and you're like, I actually just couldn't do anything because I'm so exhausted and so tired, and I need to be in a sensory space, safe space, and I just got into this and now I just can't stop. Fair enough. But the self-awareness piece is just being aware that you're doing it and the effect it's having on other people. And are you communicating it? Again, use visual or structured tools. Very useful to have the visual tool of the emotions if you're someone that struggles with them, having the structured tools in terms of your daily schedule, if that's something you need to keep in place. If you want to do mind maps to help identify your goals, if you want to have the charts that help you to identify whereabouts you are on the spectrum, to help you keep reflecting on it. The feelings wheel can be very useful to help check in with your feelings. I always have one of them handy because, well, it just helps me get my thoughts out easier. And it's like, it acts as a prompt. Yeah, I mean, there's always like therapists and coaches that you can go to if you want to have someone else to talk to about it. I have gone from finding them useful to not finding them useful. So I think like if you find the right person, that's great. That's what I hear from people anyway. And depending on where you're at in your life, maybe that's something you want to do or maybe not. But at the end of the day, whenever you are doing this work, please be patient with yourself. This self-awareness is something people spend their whole lives trying to do. I've been really working on it the past few years and I don't feel like I'm self-aware, but at least I'm aware that I'm not self-aware. And be aware of your own perspective through which you are doing this. So please don't be too critical. If you feel like, oh wow, like I'm writing all this stuff down that feels really critical, well maybe that's because you're being too critical. And so it's important that we celebrate ourselves, celebrate our strengths, celebrate the things that we're proud of, because there is so much that we have to be proud of, but we have to be conscious of it. And sometimes it's not the things that are most obvious, which are maybe the negatives. Sometimes you've got to try a bit harder to look at our strengths. But it's worth it, and that's how we often develop, is by like intentionally looking for the good things. So before I wrap up today, I just want to make sure that I leave you on a positive note, as always, because we gotta remain positive. And that is that, well, it's kind of positive, but it's that self-awareness can be difficult. It really can be difficult, because we don't always like what we see. And I want you to know that if you are finding self-awareness quite difficult, if you'll find showing up difficult, whether it's for yourself or it's for other people, please just know that you're not alone. Self-awareness is hard, and it's especially hard if you're different. And if you're still not convinced that self-awareness is useful, and I will put the researcher in at the end of this, but there was a woman in I want to say Texas. In fact, you know what? I'm going to get it up here. Her name is Trisha Urich. I should remember that because my grandma was called Trisha. And she talks about the importance of self-awareness and why people who are entrepreneurs who were very successful were more likely to be self-aware, and what it was that they did that made them this way. And one of the things that she found was that entrepreneurs who had high levels of self-awareness were more likely to be successful. However, it wasn't just having self-awareness, it was the way in which they went about getting it. And so she said that for people who repeatedly asking themselves, why am I like this? Why do I do the things I do? And this is a trap I got stuck in for ages, because I thought that was self-awareness. So it's more about the way in which we're critiquing ourselves and becoming aware is important. And so the people who asked why were more likely to be depressed and anxious, whereas the people who asked, what can I do to change this situation? What is it that created this situation? What can I do to better understand myself? What are my strengths? Were more likely to be positive, more likely to be successful. So if you are thinking, okay, what am I going to do to be more self-aware? Just remember, if you remember anything from this podcast, if you catch yourself asking why, you're more likely to be depressed and anxious. So whenever you catch yourself asking, why am I like this? Why did this happen to me? Just remember, cross out the why and turn it into a what. What can I do to change this situation? And she said that when she did the tests of all the people who were entrepreneurs, I think it was something like 85% of them thought that they were self-aware. However, when it came down to it, it was something like only 15%. This could be wrong. I'll put the stats in the description. But it was something like a very small percentage of people who thought they were self-aware actually were self-aware. So if you're out there and you're thinking, I'm really self-aware, the odds are that you're actually not. You're actually probably not that self-aware. And in order for someone to be considered self-aware, the people around them had to view them as self-aware, and they themselves had to view themselves as being self-aware. So if you are interested in doing it, if you are self-aware, maybe start by asking yourself and then asking the people around you. Thank you everyone so much for joining me on today's episode of Self-Awareness at Autistic Alignment. I really appreciate you all being there, and I hope you enjoy doing this episode as much as I enjoyed creating it and being here with you. I'm also looking forward to next week's episode because it's on emotions, and I love the details and I get to unpack a lot more of what we talked about in this episode. Please enjoy the rest of your week. All my love and happiness, and thank you. And if you were not on your way to becoming self-aware, or if you were on your way to becoming self-aware at the beginning of this episode, congrats, keep going. I really encourage you. You're doing a great job. And if you are just right now feeling inspired to become self-aware, you got it. Good luck. Bye. Okay, so let's go into a little bit more detail. So what is self-awareness? It is essentially our internal compass that helps us understand who we are, why we do the things that we do, how we feel, and like I said before, it helps us navigate the world. However, when we develop, oh my god, I can't do it by looking at the script.